Good afternoon and welcome to our first Let's Talk with Dr. Troxell. I'm Corey Ryan, Chief Communications Officer here at Leander ISD. Welcome to our little studio. How are you doing today, Dr. Troxell?
Corey, I'm having a fantastic day. How's your day going?
You know, it's been a great day. Got a chance to visit schools, got to see some of our broadcast students at Cedar Park High School. So anytime you get into a school, it's a good day.
Our kids are impressive.
So we are going to go ahead and get started with some questions. For those tuning in at home, please, and that's a little technical difficulty, on mute now. So for those tuning in at home, I got the laptop here. Please submit your questions. We got it going on Facebook and on YouTube to be able to answer some of the questions. I'm going to go ahead and get started to give you all an opportunity to go in and input your questions, and then we'll take the questions here. Dr. Troxell, one of the big things we've been hearing about at the start of school is concerning traffic in and around our schools. We've heard concerns from students and parents, particularly in the Vandergrift 4 Points campuses and at the Rouse and Wiley campuses. Talk about what's going on with the road projects.
I'd be happy to. First of all, we have to remember the first couple of days of school, there's always increased traffic because we have a large number of people that either drive themselves if they're in high school to school or they're being dropped off by their parents. That traffic will ease as the days go forward because we'll have more and more students that will ride the buses or stay after school. Regardless of that, we really need to talk about some road improvements. And let's start with the Rouse-Wiley area where we have Raider Way that will have some improvements made over the course of this year. It will be widened and allow for ease of traffic both going north and south out of both of those parking lots. And certainly by this time next year, both of those projects are slated to be completed. And we appreciate tremendously the work of the city of Leander to ensure the safety of our kids getting out of both of those schools. But then we also have the project down at 4 Points that we've been working on really for now nearly a decade. But we're making some progress, Corey. We're starting to see some movement. We've had some very productive meetings with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And for those of you who don't know, what we want to do is access a utility corridor that runs behind Vandergrift High School to build a second road into the 4 Points area. That would require us getting permission from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. We hope within the next certainly 10 months we'd get permission to go ahead and have that road be constructed. Now, getting permission from U.S. Fish and Wildlife is only the first step. We then also have to, at that point, go to the county and to the city of Austin to get permission to build the road. And in the last bond package, we had approval from the members of this community through the bond referendum to have at least the design of that road and mitigation that has to occur when you build on a preserve and utility corridor be approved by the voters. So we're making significant headway, but we still have a ways to go in the 4 Points area.
Awesome, and we actually have some questions from the audience, so we're going to go ahead and take those. We have a question about PACE programs. The question is regarding any changes to PACE programs and being rolled back or reduced, and then specifically talking about PACE Math no longer being a pull-out program. Can you talk about some of of Leander ISD's focus on PACE programs?
Well, let's talk about why PACE exists to begin with. PACE is there to ensure that students have material being presented to them in a manner that they can access easily. So PACE is really an accelerated program in multiple subject areas. And let's talk about PACE Math, for example. So in PACE Math, when you have students going through that program, it begins in the elementary schools. They're going to get accelerated instruction and increased instruction in mathematics. And the reason the program was put in place quite some time ago in our school districts was to ensure that students had their needs met that were accelerating their abilities in math and other subject matters. We always are looking at the PACE program to see what needs to occur in order to enhance or improve the program because we're a continuous improvement district. There are no plans at this time whatsoever to change the PACE curriculum at all. But I will tell you that you'll see a constant review of every program we have. And so during the course of the year, there may be questions that go out to teachers who teach PACE or to students who are in PACE classes to see if there are improvements or enhancements we can make to the program. Additionally, there are district-wide initiatives to evaluate all of our programs, and PACE may be one of those programs that we ask our curriculum team to look into, but we would want the assistance of parents, students, and teachers before there be any type of changes to PACE. It's a successful program that I believe is one that will be in our district for many years to come.
Katrina, who submitted that question, used the term pull-out program. Can you kind of give some information for those who might not understand what is considered a pull-out program?
You know, one of the things about education is we use a lot of jargon. So let's talk about the jargon of what's called pull-out or push-in. So pull-out programs are programs where students are in a regular education classroom but pulled out either for interventions where they need additional assistance or acceleration. And those programs may be things like dyslexia, additional reading assistance in elementary schools. You may be pulled out if you are accelerated and go down to what would be a challenged environment where you can get accelerated instructions. That's pulling out. One of the things that our district has tried to do over the years is to push things into the classroom so that students are together both for acceleration purposes and intervention purposes. We're seeing more and more of that, particularly at the elementary level. So the PACE program right now is a separate class where really you're pushing into the classroom environment where kids aren't being pulled out for the accelerated instruction. We hope to continue that.
Thank you, sir. And the next question we have comes from Kara Owens. It's about communication. As you're aware, the board has been discussing a communication goal as part of their superintendent performance goal. So her question is, in considering and evaluating improving communication, have we considered putting a committee together and including community members on that committee to focus on poor communication and institute new policy?
Yeah, we actually have several committees right now that are going on that review the communication issue. One of those is the District-Wide Educational Improvement Council, or DWIC. That's the acronym we use. And they will examine various issues throughout the year. One of those are the district goals as well as the superintendent performance goals. What you're referring to, Corey, is one of those superintendent performance goals that the board is currently studying related to communication. So the way that we'll get community input on that particular goal will be through DWIC. But we're always looking for community members to serve on various committees. As a matter of fact, at the next board meeting a week from Thursday, we'll be talking to board members about that and asking for some input on different committees. We also have a Friday report that goes out to the Board of Trustees each week, and we're asking for the board to look at some of the committees, including DWIC, where we may get additional input. But we're looking for ways to expand community input on all the different areas of operations, including communication on a regular basis.
And it's really important for community members to know that some of the most important committees that we have in our district are our campus site-based improvement committees. Can you give a little bit of information about what a site-based improvement committee is?
I will. It's called the CIP, again, another acronym that we use in education, but it's a campus improvement committee which really comes together to look at all operations within a campus itself and to write a plan for improvement on that campus that's then eventually submitted to the Board of Trustees and posted on the district website for that campus to be reviewed by the greater community. There's always that involvement on a campus level. But you know, the other ways that people get involved in our campuses include PTAs. It's a very, very strong component of our district, as well as working on various booster clubs at the secondary level or even on foundations that impact district-wide or everything that happens K through 12th grade in our school district.
Awesome. So everyone in our audience watching at home or on your smartphone, please continue to submit questions. I'm going to go back to some more questions. Leander ISD last year implemented our Let's Talk program, which is a customer service platform where anybody can address any questions or issues they have. This year we are actually launched our support page or our knowledge base to be able to help empower our community to get answers to those questions before they have to ask them, still giving the opportunity to input questions for our experts in various areas to be able to address. You can learn more about that at support.leanderisd.org to start to access that knowledge base. Some of these questions that I'm going to read now as we give our audience some opportunities to continue to input questions are things that we're hearing in Let's Talk, especially in the last 2 weeks as we started school. We talked about traffic and roads. The other big thing has obviously been air conditioning on school buses. What's the status on the situation that we heard a couple people talk about in our board meeting and certainly heard through Let's Talk?
Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone who came to the board meeting to speak to the Board of Trustees and to the administration about a very important issue, and that's air conditioning on buses. I think before I talk specifically about air conditioning on buses, I'd like to talk about the wider issue of how we get students home in a safe manner who are transporting either on a bus or in their own vehicles. So one of the things that we have to look at is the flow of traffic around the school. Let's take, it's not just isolated to this part of the district, but let's take the 4 Points area. I really want to compliment the principals at both 4 Points as well at Vandergrift High School, and that's Charlie Little and LaToya Easter, for going out and directing traffic and allowing buses to leave first before the major car traffic hits the intersection of 2222 and McNeil Drive. So that's a real strong initiative taken by the campus themselves. Secondly, Mr. Little's initiated this week 2 loading zones. They've always had 1 loading zone at Vandergrift High School that allows about 5 buses to be loaded at a time. There's actually 16 buses typically that leave Vandergrift High School. He's got 1 now loading area where it typically has occurred on the south side of the building and 1 on the north side of the building over by athletics, so we can load double the number of kids quickly and get the buses out fast. We appreciate that. Also appreciate the efforts by our central administration. Ann Hatton, who oversees transportation, has done a good job with their team going out and really monitoring what's happening in the loading zones and in various areas throughout the district. We also have people like Russell Bundy, who's our new director of security, who's been having regular conversations with TxDOT to see if there's ways that we can change and alter the sequencing of the lights, both at places like Raider Way, but also over by 4 Points to ensure that traffic can get out more quickly, and to look at if there's things that we can do where kids are parking in areas that may be hindering a little bit of the traffic flow out of our schools. So I appreciate all that. And we also already talked about the road efforts we're making, and there's a lot of things that are happening. One of the other issues that comes up frequently and asked of me is the bell schedules. And we're certainly looking at the bell schedules, but I want to make it clear that altering the bell schedules can have an impact sometimes that's negative on some of our students if we don't look at all the ramifications. For example, moving the bell schedule back just 10 or 15 minutes in the morning for Vandergrift High School and Rouse and Cedar Park and all the other high schools in the district means that students who are in extracurricular activities have to get to school 15 minutes earlier. We want to look at what the traffic is like 15 minutes earlier in the morning, or pushing back middle school bell schedules 10 or 15 minutes later in the day would mean that we'd be exiting the middle schools sometimes as late as 4:15 or 4:20. We want to look at what the flow of traffic would be like at that time on major roads, but also kids having to leave extracurricular activities to compete in volleyball tournaments or basketball games or whatever it happens to be throughout the year, and the impact on lost instructional time. So it's a complex matter. So going back to your original question about air conditioning, we've been studying air conditioning now and looking at the impact on air conditioning on the buses. When I say impact, you have to look at it for what would it take to actually pull some of our buses out of the fleet that drive throughout the course of the day and get those retrofitted. We have to look at what's the cost of that retrofitting, and it's going to vary depending on the type of bus and the age of the bus. We also want to look at what's the cost of that retrofitting. So those are all the issues that have to be taken into consideration before we move forward. Next Thursday, a week from yesterday, actually, a week from today, we will be sitting down at a board meeting looking at all those issues with our Board of Trustees, including how do we finance retrofitting buses, and when we order new buses, do we include air conditioning on those new buses? So it's a complex matter that will be presented to the Board of Trustees with options for them to look at, and also looking at the pros and cons, because when you have a financial expenditure, there's also an opportunity cost to other programs that may not occur if you're spending the money on air conditioning buses.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to point out that there were some of the feedback that we heard from community members. For example, there was a community member who had heard, or a parent that had heard that we were restricting students from lowering bus windows and things like that to prevent flow of air. And I know that I had some conversations with our transportation director, and you did as well, and just making sure that we got back in front of our bus drivers and said, no, we want to make sure the windows are down. Making sure kids have access to water, and then our principals, I think what I'm hearing too, is one of the best changes they've made is making sure that kids are inside as long as possible and not sitting in idle buses.
Well, yeah, it's a really great point, and really it was the attention brought to this matter by parents and community members to say on some of our buses the windows are up at times when they could be down. We always want to encourage windows to be down. Now there may be situations where you're idling in heavy traffic if there happens to be an accident or something of that nature, where you don't want the fumes from the cars coming into the bus. But that should be for a very short duration of time where you would put the windows up. The windows should be down at all their times. One of the things that air conditioning does is allow you to tint those windows, because you have the windows up all the time and you have air conditioning in, which is an advantage of putting AC on the buses. But we want those windows down, and we've really tried to convey that. I also appreciate what you said about our principals. They are working very hard to keep the kids in the buildings for as long as possible till they have to load, because if you don't know, in many campuses, they load in what are called waves or shifts. So the first 5 buses load, they leave, the next 5 buses load, and so forth. And we want to make sure the kids are staying in the building for as long as they can. We're going to have a lot of days where temperatures are over 90 degrees, whether it's in the month of August and September, or even the month of May and June. So these practices that we're putting in place now should benefit us throughout the entire year.
And we do appreciate all those at home watching, asking some questions. Apologize that if it took a little long for us to go through the bus response. Please know that, when we look at our Let's Talk data, we had about 30 to 40% of our 202 comments for just last week alone were tied to transportation, which is why we wanted to spend some time. We have some academic questions now from a parent or a community member. Anna Smith wants to know about special education. She wants to know what will be the effect of for Leander ISD on TEA's new initiatives to address the perceived special education cap. Do we understand how this is going to impact families in Leander ISD, and are we going to be affected by these rules with TEA?
Well, let's talk first about the issue of having a cap. In Leander ISD, in most districts that I'm very familiar with because I've worked in, never did I hear a conversation occur where a child was denied access to special education because of an arbitrary number placed out by TEA. We've always tried to put kids into the environments where they need to be successful. So what you're looking at is looking at the spectrum of services, the array of services that are available through the district and through an ARD committee process, which is again an acronym, but it's a special education committee process. You're placing children in the environment which they can be the most successful. And what you're ultimately trying to strive for is put kids into a mainstream environment, because that's very beneficial to all students when that occurs. So that's your ultimate goal always with students in our school environment. We talk about pushing in to the classroom. So we've never really been constricted by any type of cap. Matter of fact, we've exceeded that cap number every year if you go back and look at Leander ISD. I think one of the big issues that TEA is going to have to look at is those districts in the area where the cap really was limiting students' access to special education, and looking at how do you test or how do you evaluate students that didn't get their evaluations done properly. So I don't see significant changes at all in Leander ISD, but I think across the state there could be some very good things that come out of this. Matter of fact, if we see those good practices that are being implemented in other districts as we go to conferences and listen to presentations or talk to other school districts, we want to implement those here. So that could be a positive impact of this.
So, and the cap was in referring to a series of news stories, particularly from the Houston Chronicle, about the, if you could explain a little bit more, it was something in the rule following that said a percentage. Can you talk a little bit about what Anna's referring to with the cap?
Well, here's what happened. Many years ago, the Texas Education Agency became concerned about students being placed in the special education so they could be exempted from statewide tests, because students in special education certainly can take the regular test, and in most circumstances that's appropriate, but there also at that time were modified tests or alternate tests that were available for kids. And so the concern became, don't put students in situations where they're placed in special education so that they can have some exemptions to the test. I really don't know of any school districts that were doing that, but that was the concern of TEA. So they put some numbers out and talked about percentages that you shouldn't try to exceed in special education. But in the two districts I worked at as superintendent, we were significantly above that because we were meeting the needs of our kids rather than looking at state testing. State testing was a secondary concern. But the Houston Chronicle article talked about districts that were doing that and making that happen, and it also showed a decline in the number of students in special education across Texas. So obviously it did have an impact when you look at the data across the state. But again, in our district and districts I've worked in, that was not what was happening in our meetings. Principals, teachers, support staff, parents were doing what was best for kids and looking at the spectrum or the wide array of different type of services that were offered to students and making sure that the students' needs were being met by being placed into the programs that were appropriate for that child.
Sir, I'm going to say you were worried before we started this that you wouldn't know what to do with your hands. You're using your hands perfectly. You're addressing the camera.
Well, I appreciate that statement.
Are asking great questions, and I'm going to move on to the next one.
Sure.
Again, we appreciate everyone for asking questions. If we don't get to all of your questions here today, we'll be sure to follow back up with you here on Facebook and get you the answer that you need to know, or on YouTube where you leave the comment. Betty is asking, what's new going on in the district? She elaborated and asked specifically, what are some new programs? What are we doing to help teachers? Talking about school buses to make sure routes are taking less time. I guess think about what are some of the big things going on in Leander ISD for the start of this new school year.
You know, one of the things I'm most excited about is our expansion of our two-way dual language program to 2 more elementary schools. We've always had it at just 2 campuses, Whitestone and Reed, and we've expanded it to Baghdad and Knowles as well. And we're seeing great numbers of interest in those programs. So let me talk about that just a little bit. That's a program for our students who are coming from homes in which Spanish is their primary language, but they're paired up with an English-speaking child, and they work together so that the child who speaks English also learns Spanish. The child who's speaking Spanish learns English. It's a 2-way program. The benefit of that is immeasurable. You have kids who are learning multiple languages at a very young age, and we know that learning a language at a young age is incredibly important because the kids will pick up on the subtleties of that language. And when we try to learn in high school and we get older, it's a little bit more difficult with the malleability of our brains. So I'm excited about that program expanding. I'm excited about the fact that there are a growing interest in that. We'd love to see more students who are English speakers be able to enter those programs. Right now, we simply don't have enough students who are speaking Spanish or another language to offer additional student options. So that's probably one of the bigger program changes that you've seen. I'm also excited about the fact that you're seeing kids really contribute by doing community service projects. So on a regular basis, I'm getting information about our student body, not just at the high school, but down to the middle school and elementary levels, who are giving back to the community. And we're going to see that Friday night at Cedar Park High School versus Vandergrift. Before the game at 6:20, they're going to be doing a cancer awareness program, sponsored really and led by one of our students at Cedar Park High School. And this is the multi-year program. And I just love to see our kids get involved, get out there and do some initiatives. It's always exciting to see our kids do great things.
All right, I'm engaging with people while we talk here on Facebook because we're getting some great feedback and some great questions. The other things to point out to Betty's question, some of the things that stick out to me in terms of new programs we have going on that I just would hate to miss out on. We're another year of Incubator EDU, which is an entrepreneur program at Vista Ridge High School. We're launching the program at Vandergrift High School, so it'll be the first year there. Some other big things, Glenn High School will have its first graduating class this year.
Vandergrift is also going to be in its first year of the International Baccalaureate program. So there's some great initiatives going on across all of our campuses.
Awesome, and just fast and furious when it comes to construction too. So there are lots of things going on. I do want to also make sure we mention too, because the question was specifically about how are we helping and supporting teachers. One of the best things that happened this summer with our last board meeting, we adopted a budget, and it's important to note that that budget included a 2% increase, pay rate increase for all employees, and an additional $1 million to help contribute to healthcare benefits as premiums continue to rise, nationally as healthcare costs continue. I want to move on to the next question from Walhan, which is about academics. He's asking about what are we doing to improve standards of schools that are behind, particularly when it comes to the TEA ratings that came out just a few weeks ago.
So let's talk about the TEA ratings for just a moment. I think it's very important for us to know that what we focus in on is not a letter grade. We're focusing in on growing students, because you could have schools that have students who come from environments where they're very high achieving. And so they're going to earn that letter grade of an A almost automatically because the students have such enriched home lives and such great instruction going on in the schools in grades K through 8 or K through 12. So what we're looking at is the individual growth of students and how do we grow those individual students. So on campuses where we have a higher percentage of kids who come from poverty and their parents are just working to make ends meet and can't always offer some of the enrichments that you can get in a middle class or more affluent home, because you can't always travel overseas, or you can't travel down to the museum because you're trying to make ends meet. We put additional resources into those schools, and you're going to see through those resources we do a lot of things for kids to make their life better. Let me give you just an example, a story. When we have a student who's really struggling and we want to get that student accelerated in their instruction, we do specific interventions with those students. So you may see a student get a one-on-one mentor who works with him or her academically in a subject matter, and we put additional resources in to pay for those tutors and those mentors on those campuses to work one-on-one with kids. We also do everything we can do on those campuses to keep class sizes as small as we possibly can. And one of the things the board did, another initiative to help our teachers, is in 5th grade, they approved in this budget reducing the class sizes so that classes are smaller, not just at schools where we had letter grades that weren't as high as some other schools, but throughout the district. But going back specifically to those campuses, We also give them really targeted support. So you're going to see late buses running at those campuses so students can stay after school to get remediation and assistance. It's about looking at individual kids and how do we grow them. Now, I also want to remind people that one of the things we can't forget about is the kids who are accelerated in their instruction. We want to make sure that those students who can get to the master's level or perfect scores on their state testing or SAT or ACT also are pushed. And they're in all of our schools, including some of the schools that got lower grades. So we want to make sure that we're accelerating those kids and we're growing them at least an academic year, if not more, in one of the 4 core subject areas. So there's additional resources that are going into those schools, there are additional personnel that are going into those schools, and we monitor those regularly through both the local assessments that we do as well as the state assessments.
Again, we want to thank everybody for continuing to comment. We're going to try to get through as many of these questions as we can in the time that we have. Please know that we are going to follow up with everybody who asks a question here on Facebook in here. If we don't get to your question, please don't fret. We're going to make sure that we get you an answer. And we're going to focus on the questions. If you have a comment, we're definitely reading those and taking that input. We're going to try to do this once a month is our goal. So we will be back on Facebook and on YouTube to have these conversations. Deanna Root comes in with a question about funding shade covers at elementary and middle school playgrounds. She'd like to know what we can do to make this not so costly for schools to do on their own. Is there a way that we could leverage buying in bulk to take care of shade structures at schools?
I love that question because it's something I put you in charge of, and you can answer this question as well as I could. You know, talking to PTAs and talking to moms and dads and grandparents about elementary shade structures, it came to light that we really need to look at what we consider to be our practices or our protocols at our elementary schools. So let's talk about what a shade structure is for people who don't know about it. It's simply a awning that goes over parts of the playground to keep the sun from beating down on the kids when they're playing outside. Some of our schools have those and some do not. So what I've asked Corey to do is to work with our PTAs to look at what are the standards that we have in playgrounds. I wanted them to look particularly at awnings or shade structures, as well as water, because I think water is a critical component on a playground. And it's one of the things that you brought back to me that the PTAs have asked for. So I'd like that to actually become a district expense, something that we look at as a norm that we put into every playground. And then we go back and we are the responsible party for replacing those shade structures when they wear out or they fade or they start to tear over a period of years. We're also looking at what packages we could then offer for the schools to consider that would go beyond what is typically out there. So you would have a standard that you have throughout the district with water and shade structures, but then maybe a PTA would want to come in and put some additional items on a playground. And we want to standardize that so that we don't have disparities between schools that have a little more funding available through their PTAs than others.
So, and Deanna, I can answer this a little more directly. We had a meeting about our playground committee just 2 or 3 weeks ago with our operations and maintenance crews, and they are coming back with some quotes for the shade structures and the water for us to be able to discuss and to be able to consider what that would look like at our elementary school. So please continue to follow this. We're very blessed to have had about 10 to 15 of our PTA leaders partnered with us to visit and tour some of our playgrounds and to come up with these suggestions. And yeah, water and shade were definitely the 2 overarching things.
They were.
Next question. Deanna, if we can get back to your second question, we will. Trying to get through people who haven't had a chance to ask a question yet before we go back and respond to people with second questions. Renee looks like the next first-time questioner. She has a question about demographics of employees and teacher ethnicity. What are some initiatives, or how are we working or having conversations about making sure that the people who work in our classrooms and in our schools and in our district look like our community, look like our students?
That's a great question, and I will tell you it's one that we constantly talk about. What we want to do is to be very proactive and going out and recruiting the best and brightest teachers. I can tell you for an elementary opening, every elementary opening, we have about 1,000 applications that come in. But we want to make sure that we're affirmatively going out and recruiting the very best and brightest. We want people that want to be here first and foremost, that have a passion for kids and have a passion for what they have done. So again, the Board of Trustees made a very strategic move last year to allow us to hire 2 positions that really will screen and recruit people through our central office. They'll be the ones going to job fairs. They'll be the ones that will actually set up job fairs in our district. One will be a high school person who has high school background, and one will have background in K through 8. And they will go to job fairs from all types of universities. So not just the University of Texas or Texas A&M, but they'll go to schools that traditionally serve students from diverse backgrounds, like Prairie View A&M, or going to UTSA, University of Texas at San Antonio, or going down to the Valley. But we want to get the best and brightest. We want to make sure that what we're putting into the classroom represents the very best coming out of the universities or people that are coming and moving into the area. But we have to affirmatively go out and do searches at all different types of universities, all different places throughout the state of Texas. And quite frankly, it may entail sometimes even recruiting from outside the state, because we have a growing population of students, and we've got to make sure that we have the best and the brightest, not just in our classrooms, but driving our buses, serving in our cafeterias, cleaning our schools. Recruitment is a critical component and lifeblood of public education.
I'm just going to knock out a couple of these real quick before I ask you a question, because we're getting some questions that have come my way. There's a question about clear bag policy coming at football games. We got this question, actually worked with a reporter from the Austin American-Statesman. We are not implementing a clear bag policy for this year at our stadiums. Our new director of security and safety is going to take a look at it and could possibly implement something next year, but we will continue to operate under the same plans and the same standards that we have in previous years. And I apologize if my eyes are going back and forth. I got my watch beeps at me, my phone beeps at me. I'm trying to watch the questions, but these are great questions. I hope this is being purposeful and engageful for everybody. The next question from a unique person, Stacy. Unique in that it's the first question that we've seen from Stacy. Can you address security in the elementary level with portable classrooms?
Yes, one of the things that we really put forward in this district and put a lot of thought into is safety and security. And obviously one of the things that happened is about 5 or 6 years ago, back in 2013, the board did a security audit, had a security audit done. And that's one of the reasons you see vestibules being put into place in schools so the front entrance is secure and people have to go through a vestibule. We're also putting those in place at our secondary schools over the course of the next 18 to 24 months. But that does leave us vulnerable in some of the other parts of the school. If you think about a secondary campus, kids are going in and out of multiple doors all the time. If you think about an elementary level, we have some campuses that have, particularly in the back of the campuses, portables. So we do take some precautionary measures in those areas to make sure that we're as safe as we possibly can be. You'll see fencing around those areas, in particularly where portables are located. You'll see that the teachers are locking those doors from the inside so people can't just walk into a portable. And then we also have a very strong presence of people that monitor. We have 13 SROs throughout the district that are assigned not just to secondary schools but also to monitor elementary from time to time. And we just hired a director of security, which is a new position, to go out and evaluate it. One of the things that I've asked our director of security to look at that would help us even more so is to look at camera placements and where we have those throughout our facilities. He's also looking at a very interesting system that we've seen really start in Florida and starting to spread throughout the rest of the state that looks throughout the rest of the states. It is a basic app that allows you to know when a door is ajar or a door is not closed. So whether it's a portable building or whether it's a back door into a building, that would alert security that that particular door happens to be open. So in addition to locking from the inside, we've got to make sure that those doors stay latched and that we are very vigilant in making sure that the safety occurs, not just in portables, but in any door that's not a main entrance into a school. I will tell you, one of the things about the secure vestibules at the secondary level is that they're also going to allow us to lock down various corridors throughout the building. So if we do have an intruder who gets past a vestibule by coming in a door that we don't immediately know is open, we can lock down that part of the building and have actually gates that come down to secure different parts of the building. So that's something else that we're currently working on to increase our security at all levels of education.
Awesome. I'm going to knock out a couple more of these questions and then we'll ask one final question of Dr. Troxell. Again, we're going to continue to follow up. If you have a question, you don't get a chance to answer it here or ask it here, please also go to support.leanderisd.org, see if we have the answer already there, or submit it through Let's Talk, all available on that website. We had a question about water on the playgrounds. We mentioned that that's something that we're looking at elementary schools and seeing if we can put access to water outside on the playgrounds at our elementary schools. There's a question regarding shade structures, again, specifically to Baghdad. Again, still something that we're looking at doing for all elementary schools. The focus would be on if we can do it equitably, affordably, where it makes sense in the overall item in our budget. And then also to do it where it makes sense, where the playgrounds need the most TLC, and where those are needed. There's a question about costs of middle school band equipment and how expensive band can be. We ask any of our parents or our families or students or anybody who lives with our students who are having struggles. We don't want to have barriers for any kids in terms of joining these amazing enrichment programs. Please seek out your counselor, the band teachers, principals. There are resources in place to be able to connect people and not make cost a barrier.
Yeah, and I think it's important, again, for the public to know that the Board of Trustees, the administration, are very aware of that issue. We work as a team to address those types of concerns. The Board of Trustees allocated well over $1 million just last year to band equipment and fine arts equipment, additional things that were requested by the various directors. So there's always instruments that are available on campus for those that are struggling to make that particular need met. And there's other ways to assist if there's other concerns that you may have from a financial standpoint. We want access to all of our kids to all of our programs.
Sorry, again, I mentioned there's lots of things buzzing at me. We're trying to answer as many questions as we can. Last question that we're going to ask today is regarding bullying. Obviously, this is a hot topic with lots of our parents and a concern in all of our schools, and definitely something that's in the forefront of all of our principals and counselors. Can you talk about just some of the proactive things Leander ISD does and what parents and students can do to help eliminate bullying?
Yeah, and I share that same concern. I taught 6th and 8th grade. I think middle school is a transitional time, but bullying can happen in any grade. But I know that's something I always watch for as a teacher, and it's something that we watch for as administration. Some of the proactive things that we do is really training with our kids on how to treat each other and talk to each other and be kind to each other. That's an important part of our curriculum that we have through our counselors, but also in our classes. We initiated just a year ago in the elementary program a kindness program throughout all of our elementary schools. It really focuses on social and emotional well-being of our kids. And we're seeing an impact of that. It started and was piloted at Knowles. We're very blessed to have some of those programs in place. But if there is a situation where your child is experiencing the effects of bullying at school, we need to know about it. And one of the things I would encourage you to do is to contact your counselor at a school, contact the teacher at a school, or contact an assistant principal or a principal so we can immediately intervene. We want to look at both the students who are struggling by being the victims of bullying, but we also have to work with the student that's doing the bullying because that child needs help and assistance as well so that they are coping with life's stresses without resorting to that type of a measure.
Sir, I want to thank you for taking the time today. It's been great. We've appreciated all the comments. I think it's been really engaging. We do want to send the people off with one final thing. Sir, when I look at my start to the school year, one of the things that made me smile the largest was this clip of Dr. Troxell busting a move at, was it Cypress Elementary School kindergarten classroom?
I was actually at Deer Creek.
Deer Creek. Set up the clip for us, sir.
Well, what was happening is a group of kindergartners were in class in a circle. And what the teacher was trying to do was to get them to open up on the first day of school and to express themselves and to feel comfortable in school. And she was doing it through dance. And so she was encouraging the students to dance, and she asked if I would role model for that. And I will tell you, it's not the foxtrot, it's not any really fancy dance, but it's a little bit of a movement just to try to get the kindergartners excited about being in school. I'll do anything to make kids happy and productive in school, and I really appreciate the efforts of our teachers. And gosh, bless our kindergarten teachers because they do really incredible work in their classes every day.
Kindergarten first day of school is always a treat. We want to thank everyone for tuning in. We're going to end with a clip, send you off with a clip of Dr. Troxell dancing. Going to encourage you to follow Dr. Troxell on Twitter, ask him questions there. You can also follow me on Twitter at CoreyLISD. You also can follow me on Facebook at CoreyLISD as well. On Facebook, ask questions. Again, look for us to do this again, and thank you for tuning in. Let's leave them with the dance, Daniel.